Hey there, so today I want to start something new. I want to start looking at the so-called arbiters of goodness, normalcy, the people that are telling you and I what we should do, how we should be, how we should interact. You know those people that tell you that you're an ist or a phobe or a monster or a harasser? Well, let's look at them. Let's put their lives under a microscope or their professional careers and see how they conduct themselves. So, Tess Fowler is the first person that I want to look at. I would encourage you to do a keyword search on Tess Fowler. Go on Twitter and see exactly what you find. Don't go in and actually look up her account. Just go in, randomly search Tess Fowler, and see what all comes up. You would be surprised by the number of times that she talks about white supremacists, Nazis, and whatnot. And you would probably be surprised even more to find out that this person is talking about you. It's pretty ugly to think that someone like that is talking about consumers in that light until you see how they carry themselves when they approach other professionals or they go about whatever in the industry. So while looking up information on her, I found a lot of different things by Tim Bird. Now, Tim Bird, he's talking about Tess Fowler here and why she is no longer the artist for Doc Wild. Now, this is a very interesting read. It is not short, however. So there will be a little abridged version in the beginning. We will cover that. If you want to tune out there, you can. But if you want to see the blow by blow, which I would really encourage you checking out, then why don't you hang in there? So Tess Fowler, why she is no longer the artist for Doc Wild. I hope this post would be very different. I hope to tell you all that Tess Fowler had returned to work on Doc Wild and the Mad Skull, that she and I had revisited the conflict between us and, like thoughtful, reasonable adults, had reconciled and gone back to work. Toward that end, I emailed her and called her several times with humility, ready to eat more than my fair share of crow in order to make peace, in order to allow her to make good on her promises. I did this not only because I'd paid her a great deal of money, which was good as flushed if she didn't complete a job, but even more because I love her work and still think she might have produced a beautiful book, and that's still my goal. She simply ignored me. Now, I already wrote a post about all of this, a post filled of anger and bile, and I'm sure some of you saw it, but I took it down soon after because this wasn't how I wanted to be. I didn't want to present myself that way. I didn't want to talk about Tess that way. She's a fellow creator, and I didn't want to tear down or hurt her. But because I wrote that post, I sort of feel the need to readdress the matter in a calmer, more objective way. I also feel a certain amount accountability to all the Kickstarter supporters who put their money toward the dream of these books, a lump of which I just lost. I'm deeply sorry that's happened. It is set progress way back, but you will still get your books you were promised. Below is a full account of Tess's time on this job and the unpleasantness that followed. It's long, but I think it's only fair to show our work relationship in detail to fully and accurately represent what happened. It is, at least, a good case study in how choosing the wrong person to work on a project can go very badly. For those unwilling to read the whole thing, here's the short version. I hired Tess Fowler in mid-May to do the cover, 20 pieces of interior art, and layout for a Doc Wild book to be released in December. She took $1,000 advance from me. I patiently worked around her scheduling needs, including an enforced break due to carpal tunnel syndrome. I repeatedly tried to get her to read the text and engage personally with the material, to find the things in it that excited her, and to contribute creatively rather than to just draw what I told her to. She refused. She did say several times she enjoyed working with me and liked that I gave her detailed notes on her work. Tess did not devote much of her time to the project, working on it just a day or two per week, even after losing the weeks to her carpal tunnel injury. Most of her time went to other personal projects. By late October, less than 2 months before the book's release had been planned, Tess had produced just a handful of rough character sketches. She had also done a layout for the cover that I liked a great deal and had been trying to paint it, but it was turning out so badly that in a fit of frustration, she literally ripped it to shreds without ever showing it to me. Now, there's something in that too. Note how he says that later on because it's very interesting. She then accused me of being hard to please and denied the very terms she agreed to months earlier. She only insisted she was supposed to do 5 illustrations rather than 20, and that she had never agreed to do a layout, quote, since that's not even in my list of skills, unquote. But the terms of agreement are in an email I sent her as very clear bullet points, and her agreement to those terms is just as clear, in parentheses, and enthusiastic, in parentheses, in her immediate reply. While we were debating this and our relationship was collapsing, she started trying to use my depression, start parentheses, which I'm very open about and have written of quite a bit on this blog, close parentheses, as a weapon against me, trying to portray me as irrational in order to make it appear our problems were all my fault. Now, Tess Fowler has cut off all contact despite my repeated efforts at reconciliation and to give her another chance, and refused to refund my advance, even though it is now past Christmas, the book is not out, and I've not received a single thing she agreed to provide for that money. Now, for the full story. Alright, so instead of covering everything within this, we are going to hit some of the high points and establish what Tim Bird is saying. That way, we still have everything mapped out. We can look at everything, but we do not have to spend 3 hours covering all of this. So in the beginning, he talks about how he'd been watching Tess Fowler for a few years. He got the rights to Doc Wild book back, and he thought that Tess would be interesting to work with. He wanted to do an anthology, so he offered Tess a job, and she accepted. We agree that what she'll do is she'll do a painted cover and 5 full-page illustrations, 1 for each of the stories. So she's very happy about this here. She says, this sounds like a really fun gig, and I hope you know I'll sweeten the deal, sir. You'll get your money's worth with me. So we're talking about this on May 13th. Now, if those initial things don't sound like what he said in the beginning, that's because the job will change. So Tess says that she's ready for Doc Wild, and she goes through it, talks about exactly what she wants to do with it. And then on May 23rd, he sends her a PDF of Doc Wild and the Frogs of Doom. So on the 25th, she writes, in other words, I just finished it, and it's great. Now on June 4th, Tim Bird loses the artist. They resign from the Doc Wild project. They had finished up the Frogs, and his schedule had apparently been very difficult. Nonetheless, he took a year, finished up everything, but he couldn't go on. So he offered Tess Doc Wild and the Mad Skull, putting the anthology on the back burner. Now, she accepted this. Now, they agree that they're going to get the book out by Christmas, and Tess's contract is the following: a cover, layout using the templates already established. Gary says he's glad to help. 20 full-page illustrations, though we may want to cut some of them in 2 and do half pages in spots. She says, okay, I'll read through all that, and I'm pretty sure I understand it all. Whichever way you decide to go, I can say I'm okay with. Payment-wise, too, I can make it happen. Right now, can't do it because of San Diego Comic-Con, though. I'm swamped, so we'll get to it afterwards. So we go from June 4th here to the 25th. Now, on the 25th, she returns from Comic-Con, says she's okay, I'm home. What's the plan, Captain? So they begin talking about how they want it set up. Now, as he says in a lot of darkened versions here, he wants certain things. Like on the 22nd, he said he wanted more pulp paintery, less comic cartoon. He also asked her to start reading the book and listing possible illustrations, seeing what images spring out at her that excite her. So this is kind of his process. Now on August the 3rd, Tess is ready to get to work. She agrees to give me the original artwork as part of our deal, and they reiterate the terms. He pays her $1,000 in advance. I tell her, by the way, just to reiterate, I'm open to considering any changes you might come up with for characters, book themselves, branding. They agree. Again, the cover should be more painterly, less comic booky, and stylistically somewhere between the original Doc Savage pulp covers and the 60s, 70s paperbacks by Bama. So on the 4th, Tess sends a couple of initial character sketches. Everything's going good. On the 9th, we get another 5 days, 3 more rough sketches. So they talk about a few things there. Then the 13th, so you see days skipping through. Things still seem to be going well. Tess sends a very rough sketch of a cover design with a wild beset by snakes. Said, this is very good. I like the dynamic there. And then, boom, Tess has carpal tunnel and can't work. So they start talking about this. Now, the carpal tunnel portions, you see that go up to the 31st. Then Tess is profiled in a prominent website. They ask her what she's working on. She says that she's great. She's working with Tim Bird, who does wonderful work. You should check him out. So they're talking again. Still the carpal tunnel is going on. September the 1st. The 5th here, and then you have on the 5th, she said, how is it coming? Tess replies, good, actually, just working on the pencils now. I'm enjoying myself. You might totally reject it, but I took everything we discussed and just let it fly. So say, well, I do want you to enjoy yourself. So on the 6th here in September, Tess sends a new sketch cover. I like it a lot. I give a few notes, including I like the dynamicism of the poses, though Brian seems a little bit stiff. So Tess sends a few more refined sketch. She asks if she can publicly share it, and he says yeah. So they discuss some of the work here. I'm going to read what he has darkened here again because it's part of his point. But only if you think it would work, and only if you think it would work better than something else you have in mind. So he's telling her that he wants to leave it up to her. She responds, on Brian, I know. That comes with color because of him seeming stiff and static. I guess I can finally render everything, but it takes a lot of the coolness out of the final stage of this. I tend to fix stuff like that in the painting stage, and it lends more to the finished piece if I find his proper tension and emotion right at the end. So then we get to the 25th. So we've gone from the 13th to the 25th. It's 12 days here. He asked for any more progress because I'm starting to feel a little less, he's feeling a little less comfortable about the idea of them hitting Christmas, and that's really what he wants. Tess says, I'm still toying with designs. I have 11 so far. Now, when she says that, remember one thing. He notes this too. She notes 11 designs so far, but he's not seen all of that. Let's go through a little bit of this too. He says, that's reassuring to see or to hear. Just let me know a little more of what's up. Tess says, no problem, will do. We can fab about costume design some. She sends her concept of what she really liked to do, and I'm agreeable. I say, it doesn't really feel like my wilds when, he sees that. And even though I'd been largely positive about the direction she'd been going, she gives up and goes back to Gary's design, which is fine. And his designs are great. And the consistency between the books will be nice, but it's a bit disappointing because I can tell she's throwing in the towel creatively. And lest you think there was a lot of back and forth and rejected designs and such, know this. She said she'd done 11 concept sketches on danger clothes, but she'd only shown me one, which I gave her notes on, and then she showed me the sketch above, then gave up. So we're up to the 26th here. So we've gone one day here. And I said there's good info being passed back and forth. I feel good enough to attack the cover. So he's like, okay, now there's actually something going to happen here with the cover. Now, when they're talking, Tess writes on the 4th, I have a slew of progress photos, kind of boring, but they exist. Am I allowed to show them on Facebook? I say, sure. When will you be posting? And October 8th, she writes, update, still working on the cover. I've not forgotten about you. Now, as you can see, even when she was working on the book, we weren't making much progress. Weeks passed in which she spent only a day or two doing anything related to the book. The rest of the time went toward other commissions, and I was getting progressively more concerned about the possibility of getting Mad Skull out when the agreed time frame, specifically when she got out that case of carpal tunnel and she couldn't work. They had the delay there. So he's worried about the delay. On October the 9th, he writes, and he's like, the more I look at the text, he's giving some notes on whatever. There will be images along the way that I think are essential, but I think you'll do your best with imagery that directly inspires you. He's telling her, do what you want there, really be inspired. She flat refuses. You're the captain. What I need from you are clearly worded orders that I can either execute or discuss with you openly. I'm happy with the creative dynamic between us. So we jump to the 12th here. By chance, I happened to see the process shot. He says it looks pretty terrible. The painting's murky and rough, and the skull looks awful and disproportionate. I'm a bit annoyed that she didn't bother to let me know she'd posted it or to send me a copy directly. I write, I only just spotted the process shot of the cover. It looks promising. So he did not relate what he's thinking here. He's actually being nice about it. I'm hesitant to say much since, as you pointed out, it's tough to see the final product in it yet. I will say that Brian still seems static and the skull doesn't yet look very much like a realistic skull, but I trust it's in the nature of its early stages. She didn't respond. So a couple more days, he writes, any more progress? She says, I plan on posting a photo later today. It's like cool beans. Then a series of emails from her, basically this frantic motion. I'm really close to scrapping this cover after your last comments, and the more I look at it, the more I think it's not what you want. But then again, you aren't really sure what you want either. So I'm between a rock and a hard place. Then, yeah, I'm scrapping it. Then, okay, let's start over. The first cover is gone. So we're talking about an October 14th without seeing anything. Cover is gone. I tell her, well, it's hard for me to give input when I don't see the piece. You want me to communicate, which I understand, but that goes both ways. She literally rips the painting up without ever showing it to me in its advanced form, accuses me of not knowing what I want, then says the commentary about the skull not looking human and you not liking Brian's pose was frustrating. She writes, my advice for color, if you want to keep the skull, is we go with an entirely black and gray inked piece like the Harry Potter I just posted. Then the contrast of the nose hole and eye holes won't clash with the snakes and everything will stand out properly. Then I can color it by hand. This way we won't have to worry about anyone being washed out, and the snakes will be reduced to their most basic element with fewer colors. It's a noir piece versus a painting. Much easier, much cleaner, and fewer issues. This here, the picture you see, this was the Harry Potter piece she referenced. It didn't make me optimistic. It wouldn't make me optimistic either. As you can see, it's not exactly evocative of pulp covers, nor is it remotely what she was hired to do. So we're on the 15th. He writes, okay, I'm going to need more time to grok all that what you said, but I do want to say that the narrative in our interactions that you're presenting doesn't seem fair to me. Any vagueness or not knowing what I want that I've exhibited has largely been expressly to allow you as much creative input as I could without actually losing my own vision. So he writes out some stuff. The skull here, he's talking about what he wanted there. The danger close. Like I said, he puts out a very detailed note. And also, we were going to originally have this out now on Christmas. So on the 17th, he writes, still pondering. You're sort of telling me we can't do what we originally planned to do, so I need to settle for something different. She replies, had I known you were going to be so hard to please, my responses might have been different, but this is what we have. Now, unfortunately, I start to get angry, but remember, he hired her in mid-May, so he gets a little angry, and they start having a few disagreements with that, and this is where things start to get kind of ugly. This is where you have a shift in communication. She makes certain comments when we get about here. Now, she's essentially telling him to shut up or not bother to not bother with all this communication stuff. He gets frustrated. He starts to give up on the collaboration. Okay, if we're at that point, do your cover. You, after all, have the money for it. If I like it, I'll use it. She says, or you could go back and read through my options and we could discuss those, since that's the best way for me to give you what you want. And since I spent $500 on Copics and paint to do this. And he breaks. Let's cut our losses. You were going to get $2,000 for the book, half up front, $500 for the cover, $1,500 was for 20 pages in the layout. He goes through that. And Tess says, I never agreed to book layout since that's not even in my skills. So he pastes everything that she agreed to do. Again, taking the bullet points from their email. And he notes that he's disappointed with the way things are going and the way that their relationship is floundering here. Tess says, those were the things you requested. This is what was agreed to, and I will send you a screen cap if needed. I was super confused when you talked about me needing to do 20 illustrations up front when you said that before. Now I see you were confused. In fairness, we did exchange hundreds of emails, so I get why you may have missed that. And, and she quotes the terms we'd agreed upon for the short story book she initially supposed to do. She also says, I think maybe you do need to get that help you were talking about. Our exchanges have been confusing and weird to say least, and I didn't understand. I can only assume it's the illness. Now, from me, I just saw a post on basically med-shaming people, but I think they call this ableism, when you're taking and insulting someone because they have a condition. That is ableism, Tess Fowler. So, he talks about how he has been open and forthright with what he's gone through here. So Tess continues, if you're not willing to move forward and are in fact firing me from this project, let me know. I'll conduct myself accordingly. So you can clearly see that Tess does not immediately interpret my earlier frustration comments as a termination. And indeed, they weren't meant, he didn't mean to fire her. He was just frustrated and pissed off and venting as human beings do. So he tells her, yeah, that's not exactly what I'm saying. We need to, you agreed to something specifically. And again, Tess Fowler replies, I did not agree to 20 pieces up front without pay. The agreement was for $1,000 for a cover and 5 illustrations, with you getting the original art. Considering how many emails you tended to send flying all at once, your confusion actually doesn't surprise me now. You had no real idea what you wanted from day one, and I could cite multiple examples where you communicated via emotion instead of logic or facts, and you got frustrated when I would try to steer discussions in a logical A to B type direction. I really thought I was comprehending what you wanted, but I was following emotional cues from you that were mixed with informative cues, and it really became a jumbled mess. Reading Frogs was actually much the same way. Lots of jumbled detail and crisscross lines of logic, etc. Emotions delivered like a hammer fall. It kind of makes more sense now that I'm aware how deep your condition goes down the rabbit hole. She adds, maybe it might be a good idea to halt all of this until your health has been seen to. I'm willing to shelve it until you're actually up to discussion, or if you're feeling the need to fire, that's fine too. Again, we see that she doesn't see what has been said up to the point as termination. I say, I'm thinking perhaps you didn't actually read the details you agreed to close enough, Tess. The stuff I quoted earlier laid out a payment scheme in the larger scope, including 20 illustrations and book layout. Your reply in the very next message then gives a reply, and he continues. He's talking about their contract. It's legally obligating. Tess says, I was trying to be both kind and understanding about this. I can see that's not going to happen. So he replies, I'm not being unkind or showing a lack of emotion. I'm defending myself first from accusations that imply that I've been a harsh taskmaster, which I've not been, and then from your decision to use my depression tactically to cast doubt on my ability to think clearly. I assure you, I think very clearly. Tess then proceeds to quote at length the negotiation and terms we had on the anthology she'd originally signed on for. I say, Tess, again, everything you're quoting was on the anthology. That was all superseded by the agreement we made later when you agreed to take on the main book instead. So Tess replies, Tim, maybe you should reevaluate your health issues. I cannot find the exchange you're referring to, but does it matter? He said, yeah. I think the terms of our contract matter quite a bit. I cannot change what you decided you don't like. So all I am receiving message-wise from you now is why you think you're right and I'm wrong. But I see now this was done in an effort to fire me. Again, she goes back to fire me because firing her allows her to keep money. So he replies, I'm actually started today's exchange with two things in mind. First, to let you know I was considering the things you said, including the different possible approaches to the cover. Second, to let you know I wasn't crazy about the ink-washed idea, so that perhaps you might find another solution. Your reply called me hard to please, and I took umbrage at that because I found it radically unfair. So he's insulted there. He is her boss. I mean, really, he's paying her for a project, so he goes on about that, and they are having a pretty ugly exchange here. So he goes on to talk about, with what Tess says, finally at that, I'm not reading this. I gave you my answer. Goodbye. So given the choice between getting back to work and making a good faith effort to salvage the book or quitting, Tess shuts the door and keeps the cash. So we're at October the 18th. Again, he tries to salvage the situation. Tess, this will be longish. Please read it, as I'm not trying to badger you. I'm trying as well as I can to make peace. Goes through, a lot of things that are trying to be nice here. Now he sends this on, and then we go from October to November here. He writes, now that some time has passed and blood hopefully cooled, I was wondering if there's any chance of us getting back to work. She refuses. Angry, I say, I suppose it's easy to walk away when you have the money and don't have to work for it. Money you work for is a tougher gig and an honorable one, I'm sure. So on November 20th, he posts a blog titled Tess Fowler hiring her for art was a huge mistake, which he gave a shorter version of this, accurate in details, but also rants a bit about Tess and her intentions, professionality, and integrity. It's also angry, so he vents a bit there. He notes that. Also considered and threatened possible legal action, an option I ultimately decided against. As it turns out, small claim court like this would be carried out across state lines, overly complicated. Tess responds with a public statement which tries to paint me as some sort of deranged lunatic who is not to be listened to. Yes, I know there is a former client trying to assassinate my character in a very public way. This man has in writing stated he's mentally ill and in the present state of having to pay for what he called more electroshock therapy that he can't afford. I spent a great deal of time and energy trying to please him, to no avail, trying to do work for him when he was hell-bent on picking fights. He fired me in writing. Yes, I said fired. And now he claimed I'm a thief in the night who made off with his money. I do not know his mental issues when we started working together. I'm not currently worried about him, but I'd advise being careful and not engaging him. He's been in my email, my fan page, and on my inbox thus far. I don't know where he'll go next. Can you imagine having someone steal $1,000 from you like this, not give you anything, and then call you crazy? Yeah, so I understand she no doubt upset and very much in damage control mode, but this misrepresentation of his illness was just an escalation of what she had already been doing privately, and it's sort of playing dirty pool. Additionally, Tess actually tried to wrangle my girlfriend, Nadia, who she doesn't know beyond a very casual Facebook connection, into taking sides against me. She sent her a message, "Do you realize Tim fired me? He outright fired me from a project I was trying to work on for him. I repeat, the man fired me." Only 13 minutes later, she sent this, "Am I to take it as you don't care and want to spin lies? Fine." And then she unfriended him. Now, we go from there, and then we get some more updates. Now, some of these updates are actually very interesting because they include items where Tess Fowler has actually conned people out of money. She has taken fans for a ride, not giving them things, and we have another creator like this that actually did not get what they paid for. Very interesting stuff, and we will be covering it because, again, these are the people that are telling us that we as consumers are destroying the industry, and these are the people defaming you. You know, the people that are out there doing the same thing that they say that people shouldn't do, like ableism in this case, and also, you know, just generally being terrible human beings. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. Continue watching because we'll cover more. Thanks.